Flight controller is gonna go for landing. Retro. Go. I don't go. Go. GNC. Go. Econ. Go. Control. Go.
Ninth Planet Audio.
Capcom, we're go for landing. You're go for landing, over.
Okay, we're starting to really build a case here. We know why schools are called rebels. We know why it's bad. We know so much about the history of our country of desegregation. We've seen other people try to change the Boone County High School rebels before and fail, and we know how important a mascot really is, not just for fun, but for a sense of real identity and pride. But now, we need to know how to do it. We've gotten so little direction on what to do next because no one at Boone is a champion in this fight yet. So we knew we'd need to talk to a school that used to be one of the over 200 rebels in America and made the change on purpose for the right reasons.
I would love to talk about this process because it was intense, for sure.
Meet Bobby Thomas, the principal at South High School in Denver, Colorado. His school successfully changed from the rebels in 2022, and this happened because Bobby is an example of the right person at the right place at the right time.
I'll never forget being so happy and thankful and stepping out in the hallways and seeing it looked like, a world market with students wearing hijabs and, you name it, everything you could think of. And it just brought me joy. But then over time, just trying to see the branding and walking in every day and seeing rebels each and every day, it bothered me as a leader of color.
Here's what I mean about right person at the right time. Bobby is from Denver, so he's not an outsider. His father, who is Black, was a landscaper and janitor, and his mother, who is Hispanic, cleaned houses. He played college football at Lake Forest College, so he knows the value of athletics and team building. He transferred to Metropolitan State University and earned a bachelor's degree in history. Okay, so we've got a guy who gets race, athletics, and history. Then he earned his master's degree in special education from the University of Colorado at Denver. So now we can add education to his list of experiences and interests. With all that life experience and education, Bobby walked into South Denver High and was able to look around with fresh eyes. And what he saw wasn't just the current students from all walks of life at Denver South, but the history of the Confederate imagery that used to be at the school as well.
And the more and more I started seeing things and looking at the museums and talking to alumni, yearbooks had the Confederate flag. The mascot was Johnny Reb. And the songs they used to play, when the football team scored touchdowns, was Confederate songs that supported the Confederacy.
While all those things were in the past at Denver South, one thing wasn't: the rebel name. Sound familiar? When Bobby Thomas proposed a name change at Denver South, he was contending with over 130 years of history. South High School was opened in 1893 and is one of 4 original high schools in Denver. The other 3 are East, North, and West. When Denver Public Schools named its 4 cardinal direction high schools, each took a mascot and imagery associated with that direction. North was the Vikings, East are Angels, and West took the cowboy as its mascot, and South went with the Confederacy. This goes way back further than Brown v. Board of Education. This is in the 1920s, back when mascots were actual dogs. That's the kind of entrenched history Bobby tackled.
And so I'm like, now's the best time to do this. There's opportunities as a leader that you choose hills that you want to die on. And I said, this is going to be the one because I need to make a difference for me showing up every day in my skin and who I am and for my own kids, but also for all of the students and staff in the community that we serve.
A hill to die on. That's leadership. Choosing a policy change, a culture change, not because it is easy, but because it is right. Today, we're going to go step by step to see exactly what it takes to get rebel taken from a historical school.
I was a lady rebel. What does that even mean?
The Boone County Rebels will stay the Boone County Rebels, but the image of...
It's right here in black and white in France. They might.
Bigger than a flag or mascot.
Anytime you're trying to mess with tradition, you have to be ready for serious backlash.
From Ninth Planet Audio, I'm Akilah Hughes, and this is Rebel Spirit, Episode 7, Denver South. From Spencer's experience with the petition, we know that a one-and-done approach does not stick. For anyone else out there who's listening to this episode for a step-by-step guide of how to change a mascot, Bobby is going to break it down for us. Step 1, coalition build.
I started one-on-one, meet with them individually, and then the next meeting would be me with 2 of them together, then 3 of them together, and then I would start to build an alliance that way, because I knew if I could just get a critical mass of individuals that supported this and they understood the true why, they could spread the word in the community. I started to reach out to the alumni group, got them on board. They used to have a newsletter that went out that still in 2021 was called the Confederacy. I started talking to important alumni, different types of groups in the community, city council, just to get on board. So I convened a committee of students, of alumni, of all these type of individuals to give history of South. And then I made it about me and my journey in leadership, saying, I love this place, I love this community. It's hard to lead knowing the history around us and what it stood for and where we are now, where we're trying to go. I need to really make sure I have district level support. So there were specific board members that were definitely on board. We had to get buy-in because, like I said, I had alumni represented and they weren't bought into, why are we going to do this? Like, this is not what we're about. And so having specific student groups where students spoke their truth changed some of the alumni perspective on who they are today.
With a coalition behind him, Bobby knew that the next thing was to offer an alternative. If not the rebels, then what? When we come back, we're going to dive into step 2, design. In our last episode, we talked about how nebulous it is to actually pick the next mascot. If South High isn't the rebel, what are they? Step 2, design.
I brought in a company, a branding and marketing company, where like, if we're going to do this, we need to do this right. We need to have specific logos. We need to have specific branding. We need color schemes, like all of these things. So they kind of led some of the facilitation in the marketing of it. Let's come up with ideas and thoughts. And so we had all of these options, from the Yetis to, and there's gargoyles outside of the building. We have a lot of geese around, and they want to be the fighting geese and like all of these different things, but also something that 100 years, 200, 500 years, it's going to be something that's not going to offend a specific group.
Bobby and his team had narrowed their choices down and were actually heading towards endorsing the Royals, the same name that you'll remember from the last episode, Tyrus's Quartz Hill High changed to. But then, at the last second, something else flew in.
Like, we didn't know we were going to be the Ravens. Actually, we were going to be the Royals.
Yeah.
And so it was, the Ravens came about probably the last bit of this, because we really were moving forward kind of with the Royals. And so after this whole process, we determined the Raven. We did a lot of research around the Raven. They're highly intelligent. We found videos and research that they could actually speak. They're strong by themselves, but also they take care of one another.
There's another thing that the Ravens name had going for it that you wouldn't know unless you were there at Denver South. Our producer Dan found himself staying less than a mile away this spring.
I am standing outside Denver South High School right now. It's late March. There was a big snow yesterday, but I'm walking up. It is spring break, so there are no students around.
Dan crunched through the icy snow as he made his way around the school's park-like campus.
The building is beautiful. There's just these large towers, some gargoyles. Oh, those are the gargoyles that they were going to name it after. There's a big gargoyle at the kind of apex of this roof.
Dan walked across campus, punctuated with Ravens banners, and was taken by how beautiful it all was.
So, Denver South is actually situated at the very end of Washington Park, which is a very large city park. I think there's like science museums and stuff like that in Washington Park. The kind of terminus of Washington Park is actually the high school. So the high school is on this kind of really beautiful grounds.
But it wasn't until he made his way back to his car, the only one in the school's vast parking lot, that the real reason behind the school's name became apparent.
Like all of Denver, that's a crow behind me, not a raven. Maybe it is a raven, actually. Now that I think about it, there are ravens in Denver, not crows. So there you go. There are actually ravens in the parking lot. I'll go see if I can get a photo.
Look around Denver South High School, and you see these intelligent, independent, caring birds everywhere. Sometimes the most obvious choice is all around you. It just takes a moment to realize it. Once they did, the rest fell into place.
So we thought about all of those things, like historical cheers and chants, and so should have been a rebel before. And it was easy to say now to switch it and say should have been a raven. Economy of language.
With the name set, it was time for step 3, funding.
So I did a cost analysis, the amount of money that it took to make a change like this. So just for the athletic components, and I said we have 1,800 students at the time, 23 different programs, it was over $100,000 just in uniform. We had our floor in the gymnasium was a rebel. That had to get switched out. That was another $52,000 to be refinished.
Wow. Oh, gosh. Okay.
Yeah. So redoing all the floors, finding a company that has done this before, but just being very strategic on the things that you have to change because you can't do it all.
Like the order of operations.
You just can't.
Right.
Yeah. And this is where Calais Campbell came in, who is a famous alumni.
Famous is an understatement. Calais Campbell is an NFL All-Star who graduated from South High School in 2004, and over the last 20 years, he has had a phenomenal college and NFL career as a defensive end. After graduating from South, Calais went to the University of Miami, where he played for 3 years before being drafted to the Arizona Cardinals in 2008, where he helped the team reach the Super Bowl for the first time in their history. He remained at the Cardinals for another 9 years before joining the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2017. He played 3 seasons in Jacksonville before joining the Baltimore Ravens. Yes, the Ravens in 2020 and the Atlanta Falcons in 2023. This summer, he announced that he was going back to Miami, where he'd gone to college, to play for the Dolphins at 38. But Calais isn't just good at football. He's also a good person. Ever since he went pro, Calais has made giving back a priority. When starting out in Arizona, he'd give away hundreds of Thanksgiving meals to families in need. For the last 15 years, he's held Christmas with Calais, where he sponsors holiday shopping sprees for local kids. He created an endowed scholarship for defensive linemen with a $1.6 million gift to the University of Miami. When the pandemic hit while he was in Baltimore, he gave $200,000 to help support struggling Black-owned businesses and $20,000 to families to help cover their bills. There's the 100 Sack Give Back, where he honored his 100th professional sack by giving $100,000 to teachers around the country. The list could go on for a long time. Calais' giving is extensive and generous, and in 2019, it earned him the NFL's Walter Payton Man of the Year award, the league's top honor to a player to recognize their commitment to philanthropy and community. In giving him the award, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell said, Calais Campbell's impact extends far beyond the field, into communities throughout Phoenix, Jacksonville, and beyond. One of those places was back home at Denver South.
I didn't know him. I'd only started at the school 2 years prior. Putting me in connection with him through somebody else that actually knew him, that's how the conversation started. He was talking to former teachers. Usually at that point, it's like talking to agents, talk to my people, like those type of situations.
Yeah.
But he actually had personal contacts with people in the South community that were still there.
Yeah.
You know, we needed something for our current kids, and he stepped up to the plate.
And I remember talking to, the point of contact I talked to the most was that he was my old basketball coach, but he became the athletic director for South.
Ladies and gentlemen, Calais Campbell.
And I remember talking to him about it, probably like my second or third year in the NFL. So this is probably, 13, 14 years ago.
You heard that correctly. Calais Campbell has been talking with people at Denver South about the Rebel name since just a few years into his long career in the NFL. In fact, he made sure to mention it any chance he could.
Usually when I'm going back to the school, you're with the higher ups, you're with the people who have influence. And so, I made a point to say something every time. Like, it's hard to take pride in a school that, represents something that was kind of represents oppression.
It's hard to take pride in a school that represents something that represents oppression. That feeling Calais is articulating, that conflict, is something I think that all Black kids at rebel schools feel. It's what I feel, and it's what Calais felt since he was in high school.
I remember being in high school and thinking to myself, like, this isn't really what, something you're supposed to be proud of. Like, I'd rather it be a different name. But then telling myself, like, I can't do anything about it, so just embrace it. Like, this is what it is now, so we might as well just try to my best to embrace it. But yeah, no, that was definitely something that, like, I didn't take pride in, but I, wanted to take pride in. So it was a tough situation.
Right. For most kids, for me, you swallow it and you get out. For Calais, he found an opportunity to change things in the success that followed.
Once I got to, the NFL and I was, having a career and stuff, it was just something that I wanted to try to help with.
While he'd advocated for a name change for most of his NFL career, it wasn't until Bobby Thomas put the change in motion that Calais could help it into the end zone. His involvement went beyond sizable financial support. His endorsement for the name change held significant weight as a local hero with deep ties to the school's athletic legacy. The decision to adopt the Ravens as the new mascot partly honored his influence, since he had moved from the Cardinals to the Baltimore Ravens around that time.
I am forever grateful to Calais Campbell, but I am also so grateful to the individuals in the community that stepped up to help. But we had a lot of individuals that just donated because the district didn't have that money. In rebranding with the gear, that was the biggest challenge because every sports program, every theater program, everything had to be switched from, as I showed, the Rebels to the Ravens. For uniforms, it was home and away, probably $500,000. And so we started presenting all these elements of it, and we had a vote, and that's what we decided to move forward with. It was a phenomenal day. I'm not an emotional individual. There were a lot of tears, a lot of congratulations, a lot of how dare you.
Okay, yeah, I was curious about the backlash for sure. When we return, the real aftermath of changing a mascot. They did it. They had the vote. They had the support of key players. They had the funding. So many steps to get to this crucial last one. Step 4, dealing with haters.
There were threats to my family. There were threats to me personally. We had to take a step away from social media because of alumni. We're the rebels. We've always been that. How dare you? And they graduated in 1960, 1950.
Right, exactly.
Well, now it's 21. It doesn't look like it did before. There's not a separate, boys gym and girls gym like when you went here. Like,
yeah.
Those
Black
type
people
of
are
things.
allowed to go here now.
Yeah, exactly. Individuals aren't bussed over. Mm-hmm. We have, gender neutral restrooms. And so it just was coming in a lot to a point where I actually had an individual that came to the school wanting to meet me, saying that God sent him to talk to me about the mascot switch and how to be escorted off by security.
Off the property. Wow.
And so it was a point in time where during that process, once we determined it's going to happen, I was concerned on leaving the building, who's following me. I would have to take different routes, stuff like that. But what I did is I just really found influential stakeholders that back this notion, and I asked them to help me. And what they did in their own little groups, they spread the word and the reason and rationale why, because I had a common script on why this was important.
Why was it important? Bobby Thomas may have been the right person at the right time to finally change Denver South from the Rebels, but he was not the first, not by a lot. In fact, for the last 50 years, Denver South has been undergoing what Dr. Caleb Smith in our last episode called a de-Confederatization, slowly chipping away at the Confederate imagery, hateful piece by hateful piece. There were student protests in 2009 that saw South's Confederate mascot, Johnny Reb, replaced by a short-lived gargoyle, a reference to the beautiful stone griffin that overlooks the entrance to the school. It's worth noting that these students wanted to do away with the rebel name too, but alumni organized against them. There was Harold Scott, the only black principal at South before Bobby Thomas, who in the early 1980s tried and failed to change the team name to the Penguins. But the deconfederatization of Denver South stretches all the way back to 1970, when the basketball state championships between the mostly white Denver South and the mostly black Manual High School ended in a brawl, and the school stopped playing Dixie at their games the next year. According to the Denver Post, the fights, coupled with rising racial tensions in Denver at the time, likely led the Colorado High School Activities Association to demand South move away from Confederate imagery. But I don't think it was just a fight at a basketball game that led to this change at South. It was a lot more than that.
I was bused out to Merrill Junior High School, and that was traumatic. That's a tough conversation for me to still have. I did a presentation for some folks last October. It took everything I had to walk through that front door. Just the anxiety and everything I experienced in 7th grade just came right back.
This is Terry Gentry, History Colorado's engagement manager for Black communities. She is also a third-generation Denverite who personally experienced the challenges of desegregation.
When you're on a bus, it didn't feel like it was a few minutes. It was a long journey. It was, probably almost 45-minute ride out there into a neighborhood that doesn't really want you there. With their bullhorns around the corner when we were walking out of school telling us what they thought about us.
Terry was bused to integrate a white school, due in large part to the policies enacted by Denver's first Black woman Board of Education member and the first African-American woman to hold public office in Colorado, Rachel Noel.
She joined the Denver School Board in 1965 and to make some changes, especially recognizing some of the challenges her own children were experiencing in the schools. She filed a Noel resolution.
The Noel resolution recommended closing some of the overpopulated schools for minorities and instead integrating students into quality schools across the city. It also called for textbooks to teach Black history. Sound familiar?
In the midst of all the work that she was doing, a lot of families got really angry about it, and she received a number of bomb threats.
The Noel resolution was passed in January 1969 and then repealed only 6 months later, when a new school board took office. An African-American chiropractor, Dr. Wilfred Keyes, organized 8 families to sue the school district for discrimination. The district court agreed with Keyes and ordered Denver to restart their integration plans, which focused on busing Black and brown students like Terry across the city. The response to the court decision was shocking. On the night of February 5th, 1970, 12 sticks of dynamite went off at the Denver school bus depot, destroying 24 buses and damaging 18 more. The acting fire chief at the time was quoted as saying, "The whole thing went up at once. In my opinion, it was a strictly professional job." A month later, a pipe bomb went off on Wilfred Keyes' porch. No one was ever caught in any of these terror attacks.
The extensive damage that the bombing did and the incredible fear that it imposed on our community. We were disproportionately the number of people using those buses, and especially terrifying for our parents to think that somebody would do something so horrific. And thank goodness it wasn't at the moment that we were climbing aboard the bus. And then you continue to hear the threats against the Noels, and you hear the threats against the Keyes family, and you have to still deal with people and their foul mouths and bad behavior when you got to get up and go to school every day and listening to some of that horrific stuff that they spew at you.
The Keyes lawsuit went all the way to the Supreme Court.
They determined that mandatory busing was required because there was so much disparity in our school system. Unequal education, unequal access to resources, unequal in every form or fashion.
This case is notable as one of the first instances of the court addressing segregation in a northern school, but Terry no longer had to endure the long bus rides to school. Just before high school, her family moved to a new neighborhood in a different school district. They did it for her, so she wouldn't have to attend Denver South.
If we hadn't moved when I was in before ninth grade, that's where I would have attended high school, because my whole neighborhood attended South High School. So all my classmates and neighbors that I grew up with the busing, would go to South. My grandmother and grandfather, they were close friends with Rachel Noel. So listening to my grandmother talk about some of the things that were happening. She helped to put perspective on it. Learning all of these things about our ancestors and what they had to deal with, we know you got to get up and go take care of it. You have to get up and go do it. You know, the sad part is people assume that some of the stuff we had to experience only happens in the South. And we have some incredible history here in Colorado with the amount of stuff that we've had to deal with. And we are working so hard to continue to change our experiences and continue to fight for our human rights and everyone to have a better life.
History is hard to hear sometimes. And talking to Terry Gentry is a reminder. Things that feel long ago are still right here with us. And so it's important to make change, real change, to help move us forward. Bobby Thomas did it at Denver South High School, and I asked him what advice he would have for me to make the same change, to start healing the same wounds at Boone County.
From learning from individuals before that have tried this, I think they tried to get too much stakeholder voice and involvement. I think what got me to this point is I had to identify critical stakeholders that had a strong voice, because like I said, there's still things on, social media platforms that individuals say. There were still, the chants and things, those first year or so. Mm-hmm. But again, once you had your first full group of freshmen that came in, they only knew the Ravens. It helped with athletics and our teams, and we made it affordable.
He didn't just make it affordable. In those early days of the transition, he made the Ravens gear free.
I didn't ban South gear, Rebel stuff, nothing like that at all. We flooded the market. I was able to get every student at that point in time, 1,800 students at the school, 2 to 4 different items of gear.
Nice.
So they had multiple things, swag left and right. Some of the older students were like, we're going to wear our Rebel stuff. And okay, that's fine. But over time, they were like, wow, look at that new updated logo. That's pretty cool. And, they wanted the new merch. And so we made it very modern, partnered with Under Armour, Nike, different companies like that.
Nice.
And before you know it, they're like, that's cool. I want to wear that. And we made it affordable.
Calais Campbell would have been one of those kids who needed subsidized Ravens gear.
Growing up, we grew up kind of tough. We didn't have a lot of money or resources. But we were always involved in the community. My dad, my mom, during the holidays, we're, getting free meals, but we also are taking those meals, whoever's the people are giving away, the charities giving away free meals, and we're helping to distribute those in the community to people in need. Even before I was born, my dad had a place where kids could come after school and hang out and avoid trouble. He always felt like that, if you were involved in the community or involved in extracurricular activities, that, you wouldn't be at risk with just, being Black in America and, all the negative stuff that comes with gang violence or,
right.
Police brutality or all that stuff. You're somewhere, you're active, you're busy, too busy to get in trouble. And so, so he had a place where people could come do their homework, play video games and just hang out. It is just cool to see that people care, and hopefully it's inspiration to help other people want to do something else.
Calais had been hoping for this change since he was a student back in 2004. Bobby wanted it from the moment he became principal. It didn't happen quickly, but eventually the change did come.
So the start of 2019, I started this process. Even though technically it was 2021, still the big switch over, the big projects weren't done until 2022.
Wow.
So it was about 3 years, I would say. But at least loud voices that people respected were standing behind his decision. And that's the advice that I would give. This is not a me thing. This is an us thing. Because when I first started this, trying to get as many people involved and let's do a big survey of what, it was too daunting in so many different competing thoughts and perspectives. Mm-hmm. And once I just got a respected, committee together. They made the decisions. They made the final based on some feedback, but it wasn't like a whole big process involving everyone. It just fills my cup to speak about this over and over and remember kind of the whole process. And please feel free to reach out throughout this process, or if there's anybody else I could put you in contact with, I'm more than willing to help you out.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
So change is possible. It takes community support that doesn't need to be unanimous. It just needs to come from people who take their leadership positions seriously. It takes having great ideas about what makes your community awesome and unique, and we learned it takes some serious cash. And with figures like Calais Campbell in their corner, anything's possible.
Like I represent the school. I represent, who they are. And so I want you to, have pride in me too. And I want to represent the kind of person that you can have pride in, but it has to go both ways. And so that was definitely part of the motivation to get a change. So it was a process. It wasn't like a quick process. It took a little while.
Yeah.
A lot of small conversations over time that led to picked up steam. And then, wow, now I feel a lot more, pride in my school, because, no matter where you come from, there's such an attachment, there's a sense of pride. But, I would like, for a moment there, it was like, it's pride, but it has like a little bit of
Right. Like an asterisk.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
I feel. It's exactly how I feel.
Yes. And so now I feel pride with that asterisk is gone, and I feel a whole lot of pride in my school.
Feeling school pride without an asterisk, without apology, real pride, like Calais Campbell feels now, that's what I want for Boone County High School. And you know what? Boone County High School sits on Sean Alexander Way, our very own Calais Campbell. If there was a way to get in touch with Sean, someone who also has a history of philanthropy, would there be a path to change? I mean, as much as I'd like to pitch the Boone County Seahawks, we know that Calais helped not because they were going to name it after one of the teams he played for. He helped because he felt the awkwardness of rooting for the Rebels as a young black man. If we could find out how Sean feels about the Rebels, if he wanted to partner with some very eager change agents, if. Next episode, we're going to try to find out. Rebel Spirit is a production of Ninth Planet Audio in association with iHeart Podcasts. Reporting and writing by me, Akilah Hughes. I'm also an executive producer and the host. Produced by Dan Sinker. Edited by Josie Azam. Our assistant editor is Jennifer Dean. Music composed by Charlie Sun. Sound design and mixing by Josie Azam. Our theme song is All the Things I Couldn't Say, performed by Busty and the Bass, courtesy of Arts and Crafts Productions, Inc. Our production coordinator is Kyle Hinton. Our clearance coordinator is Anna Sonnenschein. Production accounting by Dilpreet Singh. Additional research support from Janice Dillard. Executive producers for Ninth Planet Audio are Elizabeth Bakewit and Jimmy Miller. Special thanks to Jay Becker and the whole team at BLDG, the Florence Yalls, Amber Hoffman, Hillary Delaney, and Leslie Chambers. If you have a racist mascot at your high school, or are an alumni of a high school with a racist mascot and want to share your own experience, please email us at rebelspiritpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you.